Before we get started, here's 30 seconds with the late, great Alan Watts.
Means, ladies and gentlemen, would you please check your ideas and opinions at the door? First of all your philosophical and religious views, all your logic, because I say check it at the door advisedly because you can pick it up again when you go out if you feel unsafe without it. I'm not trying to argue you out of your opinions and views. I'm merely suggesting that for the sake of an experiment, you temporarily suspend them.
Season 1, Episode 1.
Welcome to Forever Break Podcast. Now, the world's #1 most loved hosts, as voted by their mothers. Here are your hosts, Lianne and Corey.
Yes, and thank you so much. We are so excited to be here for the first ever episode and season of the Forever Break Podcast. Lianne, how are you today?
I am fantastic. Thank you, Corey. Excited to be here. Excited for you to be listening.
Good. Yeah, so this is the Forever Break Podcast. We are going to be bringing you all things travel, mindfulness, self-discovery, all these little tidbits. It's going to be pretty wide-ranging. Just know that we are also novices. We don't know everything, so we're going to be learning right along with you.
We don't know anything, in fact. So it's all a journey together.
Yeah.
On today's episode, we are going to look at mindfulness and self-education. We're going to be asking, well, what the hell does it all mean? And autopilot and change, and how we can change that. Who would have thought? Then we're going to do an interview with Chris Armstrong. He's an author and certified emotional intelligence practitioner. He's won many awards relating to his work in the fields of empowerment, diversity, and inclusion.
If that's not enough, guys, go check out the Forever Break website, foreverbreak.com. You're going to be able to take a deeper dive into the topics that we discuss, and we will also be linking you to a lot of good stuff in the show notes for all of these episodes, so be sure to check that out as well.
Quick quote.
The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance, by Mr. Alan Watts.
Dance with me, darling, dance.
Focus on.
So mindfulness, what does it all mean, I hear you ask? Mindfulness is defined as a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations. Basically, people, it means stop and smell the roses.
Really, it kind of is just that easy.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not particularly mindful. Guessing that I just learned what that meant, then I don't consider myself to be particularly mindful. But you're quite good at it, aren't you? You meditate.
I try to be. I wouldn't say that I'm perfect, but I definitely have.
No one was going to say that.
No, that's definitely true. But I think that I've probably put a little bit more thought into this than you have. Maybe that's because of our vast gap in age.
You're a wise old man.
Or it's just because I care more about dealing with my problems. I don't just brush them under the rug like an English person.
No, we just moan about them. That's all. We just moan and then I'm happy.
But you know, a lot of the things that I've tried to practice over the years is just kind of staying in the moment, paying attention to your surroundings, your feelings, the different energy that's around you. Really, a big thing for me is just trying to slow down. Life can just get out of hand, especially when you're working a busy job, you've got a family, all these things that I don't really have. But anyway, you still get to slow down every once in a while. So it's a good thing just to stop, give yourself that reminder, have these little things that can just trigger you to just be like, you know what? I've been going today. Let me just take a breather real quick. And most importantly, leave that judgment behind. I just think that we kind of get wrapped up in looking at things and analyzing them and just let what's going to be. Almost quoted McCartney there.
Yeah, right. Let it be.
I really find that when I'm able to focus on these things, it just kind of enriches life. Food can taste better, colors are brighter, you can get that childlike excitement about things again, where I have this kind of weird happy dance that I do where I shuffle my hands.
You've just eaten a suspicious mushroom omelette and you're not quite sure what's going on.
Dang it, Thailand.
God damn you, Thailand.
But yeah, I think that being mindful is something that is important. I think that it's something that you can get better at with practice, and let's go on a little bit of a learning journey together.
Let's dig deeper.
So, Corey, pray tell, what do you think autopilot means?
Okay, so for me, autopilot is things that are going on in our subconscious. Mm-hmm. It is breathing. We don't have to think about breathing, but if we try to actively change our breath, that is no longer on autopilot. Now we're actually thinking about how we're breathing and how we are going to try and do this next breath differently. I think that it is things like the expression riding a bike. It's like riding a bike, Lianne. You learned to ride a bike when you were a kid, but maybe you haven't ridden one in 20 years. You get a bike put in front of you, maybe take you 30 seconds, a minute, you're still just going to roll.
Yeah, I guess the times when I've realized that I was on autopilot, I remember once I tried to grow up and get a regular 9-to-5 job, which I hated.
Shame.
I know. And I kind of showed up to work and I just was kind of like, showing up, and I got into like this routine that I hated, but I just needed money, and so I was just not thinking about anything around me, really. And that's what I kind of associate with autopilot now. It's kind of a feeling of there is no strong feeling. You're just not thinking about what you're doing, Yeah,
you're not really getting the most out of your life if you're just going through it on autopilot and not taking the time to just kind of realize what's actually going on. It's seemingly something that Western society kind of infuses into us. It makes us kind of a lemming consumer, if you will.
Great game.
Yeah. And autopilot can be influenced by expectations, personal expectations, maybe from your family or culturally. It's largely in the subconscious, and it's why we don't always see what's right in front of us.
And I think definitely change or fear of change can be linked to autopilot. So like I said, I didn't particularly like my job, but it was comfortable. And I think as humans, we are very afraid of change. And why is that? I think we're drawn to the familiar. We're definitely creatures of habit. But positive change, in my opinion, means progress. It's very different to negative change. But, just being mindful of changes happening to you, I think is really crucial in appreciating life and appreciating the situation you're in and making the best out of a situation.
What do you think about change in terms of you personally? Are you someone that is, are you comfortable with it? Because most people just do not, they kind of shy away from change.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. I think I'm like the opposite. I kind of fear, like I said, I tried to get this grown-up job and I kind of I hated the fact that I was in so much of a routine.
Any sort of complacency just kind of you run from?
Yeah, sounds like I have commitment issues, doesn't it?
Dear God.
Oh, good God.
I think I'm kind of in that same boat. I just feel like I have always thrived personally and professionally during times of change. If I'm at my best, it's when I'm starting something new. There's the excitement, there's the unknown. And as soon as things become routine, as soon as they become, I would even say, easy, and I have the expectation where I kind of know what's going to happen, so you get that predictability, I kind of become less happy and I get kind of bored. And so I think that I find that makes me different than a lot of people. But I think it's good to just kind of take some time to think about it and just kind of see where you are. And I know for me, one thing is I'm getting older, those routines are starting to set in a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's really true.
Yeah, they're very annoying. But, basically what I think with mindfulness as well, in relation to change, once you become mindful of everything, you are more aware, obviously. So if your mental state is negative and turning to the toxic side of things, this could probably be very difficult. I mean, I personally haven't had to deal with that off the top of my head.
Knock on wood.
Knock on wood, yeah. But, it can be so challenging for people to say, okay, well, I'm going to be more mindful, but that voice in my head is a bit at the moment. So I think that's definitely a big challenge that people do overcome with this. But you have to overcome these issues before you can actually feel the peacefulness in the moment. So if you do experience this, it's pretty normal. It's normal, don't worry. Yeah. There's light at the end of the tunnel.
Not everybody's voice in their head is just all happy and positive all the time, so don't think that you're alone if it's not like that. We have a fantastic guest today who Lianne is going to introduce us to.
Spotlight on.
So taking all of that information we just discussed, today we are going to be speaking with Chris Armstrong, who teaches people to apply the idea of mindfulness with learning to love yourself, further benefiting you in romantic and professional relationships, friendships, and family ties. It kind of reminds me of the old idea of how can you expect someone to love you if you don't love you. And he applies this idea practically with his clients, in turn making you a more well-rounded and secure individual. So, welcome, Chris.
Yeah, I guess just to kind of start out, being that season 1 is all about mindfulness, we'd love to ask you, what does mindfulness mean to you personally and within your field?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really about two things. So one is presence and one is intentionality. So the presence is obviously, you can't be mindful if you're not present with whoever you're trying to be mindful with or about. And in a relationship sense, what that means is if you're going to be mindful with your partner, then you have to be present with your partner. And presence isn't geography. It's not remembering when their birthday is. It's actually being authentically with them and trying to understand why they think what they think, what they're going through. And the intentionality is what happens afterwards, or at least it should. So if I'm mindful, I'm present with you, but then that presence and the awareness I gain from that presence makes me intentional about what I do, what I don't do, what I say, what I don't say. Because it's easy to say, I understand you, or I get you, or I feel you. Okay, so what are you doing about it? The intentionality is do something about it then. There should be a connection there that's not just about you understanding.
So what are the first simple steps our listeners can take to, start discovering and accepting themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step is always to let go of the judgments of others, because you're not really going to start discovering yourself or accepting yourself if all you're thinking about is how everyone else thinks about you. And unfortunately, that's what we do more than anything. Yeah. So most people get their self-worth from the validation of others, which is about the most unhealthy place you can get your confidence and self-worth, because it's never, ever about accepting yourself. It's about adjusting yourself so that other people will like who you are. So you have to let go of the judgments of others. You have to get to a place where you can turn off those external filters, or there is no second step.
Okay, so first step is just accept you are who you are, and basically stop trying to be a people pleaser, stop trying to think about others' opinions, and just be you.
Well, yeah, it's exactly what you said on the second part. It's not caring about what other people think. You have to turn off those other judgments, or you're not going to be able to accept yourself, because you're always going to see yourself through their lenses, not your own.
Yeah, and I think that's probably quite prevalent in our society as well, isn't it? Because I think every day we kind of say, okay, well, we don't want to offend anyone, and we want to be accepted, and we want to, I think it's like the hierarchical part of our society. We like that.
Yeah.
So I think that's very important.
I think that kind of just leads into that third question regarding empowerment. That's something that you've mentioned in quite a few of the articles and teachings that we've been able to look over. And what specifically do you aim to teach people in terms of empowerment?
I think the big thing is simply that they have power. So we always wait for people to give us power. We always wait for people to tell us that we're worthy, to tell us that we have something of value, something to offer. And what we don't realize is just how easy it is to influence people just based on what who we are and what we bring to the table. So if you're going to empower, you have to actually believe that you have the power instead of trying to gain that power from other people. So to your point, if you connect that with the sort of self-discovery piece, there is no self-discovery if you see yourself through everyone else's lenses. And if you see yourself through everyone else's lenses, they have the power. You don't have any of it. So you have to actually believe that you have the power. And if we want proof in the power that we have, all we have to do, as Lianne said, is look around at what's happening in the world today. Everything is fed off of the court of public opinion. Everything is fed off of tweets and comments. Our tweets, our comments. We have more power than we give ourselves credit for. We just don't think about it in the day-to-day.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that that's something that a lot of people, especially when it comes to, your single vote that you get every 4 years or a couple of years or whatever it might be, people just don't recognize the power behind that. And I think if they can change that mindset, that they can start to feel like they might actually be able to make more of a difference in the world. So that's a really interesting point to work through.
And I guess that kind of brings me on to the next one. So you are a certified emotional intelligence coach. So what does this actually, what does this mean? And how does that enable you to help other people's relationships?
So what it means is that I am certified to either teach or address emotional intelligence issues that either pop up in culture or that pop up in relationships. Emotional intelligence, as you know, is really self-awareness, self-management. So what do I know about myself? And based on what I know about myself, can I manage myself? So if I know that I'm impatient, can I manage that aspect of myself? But the other part is social awareness and relationship management. So if we go back to that mindfulness question, am I socially aware, not just of my partner, but of people I interact with? And based on what I know about them, can I manage relationships better? And when it comes to helping relationships with that emotional intelligence lens, my number one job is to get people to see the relationship and not just see themselves. Because it's easy for us to fight. It's easy for us to get into a situation where, although we're living with somebody or we're married to someone or we're dating someone, we have to be able to see that it's not just a separate someone. We're connected one way or another. So if I can help you become socially aware of the person that you're connected to, then I can help you manage that relationship with them in a way that's fruitful for both of you, equal and authentic on both sides. But first, I have to start with you understanding your own issues, that self-awareness, and why you're not able to see the other side.
Yeah. So it all starts with for anyone who's listening and they're thinking, okay, maybe I could benefit from that. From all of these answers, it's very apparent that everything starts within you, accepting yourself, understanding yourself. So everything seems to start with
empowering yourself. I'm curious, Chris, I think that we all kind of have been in a situation where we are in a conversation with somebody and the person just continues to talk and talk and talk. They're not really even answering the question you might have asked them. And they don't seem to really realize that they are just going on and on with whatever it is that they're talking about. And there's not really any gaps, seemingly. There's hardly any breaths to be able to interject and try and get your point across or come into the conversation yourself. Is that an emotional intelligence thing, or is that something else?
No, that's what we call listening to respond. So it is an emotional intelligence gap. So you listen in one of two ways. Listen to understand means that I'm listening to you because I want to understand what you're saying and, more importantly, why you're saying it. Listen to respond says, I'm listening to you, but only so that I can respond based on my pre-existing notion. Or I'm going to keep talking to you. I don't care what you have to say because it's all about me, and there is no actual listening there. It is an emotional intelligence issue. It is a number one culture issue in our country too today.
Yeah, I could see that. Definitely.
Absolutely.
we get that a lot.
So yeah, leading into one of the articles that I read regarding, and you mentioned this acronym that I really liked, but I'd love to have you speak a little bit more to it, the SWIM acronym. Just share some insight into where that came from and what it stands for.
So the full piece is swim backwards, which really just means say what I mean and mean what I say. So if you take the word swim, say what I mean. I always tell people swim backwards, which means say what I mean, and then if you move that in reverse, mean what I say. So if you're going to talk about, people always ask me, how do I communicate better? And only two words I tell them is swim backwards. Mm-hmm. Number one, communication is never a root issue. It's always a symptom. It's always a symptom, always 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. But number two, the only thing you have to do is when you talk, actually say what you mean and mean what you say. No matter what kind of a relationship you're in, but we're afraid of that because we're afraid to be vulnerable. We're afraid to be wrong. So that whole fear of failure, fear of ambiguity gets in our way of being able to do just that, which is why, again, communication is always a symptom to a deeper rooted issue.
You know what I think of is I think of Curb Your Enthusiasm and Larry David, who always gets accused of saying exactly what he means in every situation, and it can turn out to be wrong. But I get what you're saying. I think it makes a lot of sense to just
be open.
Don't be afraid of how it's gonna. Well, I mean, to a certain extent, but you don't want to hurt somebody, but at the same time, the truth hurts sometimes, and I think that that's something to be really mindful of. But at the same time, I think that it's important to get your point across so that things don't get blurry or there's no ambiguity and stuff like that.
Well, and let me just say, if you take the swim backwards with the mindfulness, then you're not going to hurt someone's feelings. Like when I say what I mean and mean what I say, it means in principle, not in words. So if the first words that pop out of my mouth are, I hate your dress, that's not being mindful. I can say what I mean in a way that's mindful. So it's where it all comes together. I can say what I mean and be emotionally intelligent, to be socially aware of how it might hurt you depending on how I say what I mean. So there's more than one way to say what you mean. That's the point.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if anyone's listening, don't literally say what comes to your mind. Still be socially aware.
But
So because of COVID-19, and obviously we're all in the quarantine situation, we're all spending way more time in close confines with parents, partners, children, roommates, etc., etc. What are some tips to help people to get along during this challenging time? Just be respectful of each other.
Yeah. So I think the first one, which, may or may not surprise people, is to find outlets. So right now, people don't have outlets. I mean, work is an outlet for people from home, and not in a bad way, but in a way that's, the reality is, it's a way to recollect your thoughts, even while you're just driving to work or whatever. Same with going to the movies or playing basketball or walking down the street. So find outlets, number one. It is healthy. It's necessary. You have to say, even if your outlet is just going into one of the other rooms for an hour, find outlets and communicate why you're going to do the outlets, right? So it's not this surprise. It doesn't look like distancing. But the second thing is, and I think probably even more important than finding outlets, is to take time to actually connect. Because here's what's happening. Because I've had my client load has increased like 400% over the last 4 weeks. Because here's what's happening. People are in close quarters right now. So they're working together. So somebody's on Zoom at one end of the table while the other person's on Zoom at the other end of the table. And the way they see it is, well, it's sort of virtual business as usual. So we can keep living our life the way we lived it before. No, because you are so close to each other now physically, whether you're family, whether it's a couple, you actually have to recognize that. Again, find those outlets. But when those outlets don't exist, find opportunities to just sit and talk. Because believe it or not, the fact that you're physically closer together doesn't mean that you're intellectually closer together, and it doesn't mean that you're emotionally closer together. And when you talk about the relationship pie, the physical, the intellectual, and the emotional, that intellectual and emotional is what's going to suffer right now, because you feel the physical closeness, so you don't feel like you need the other two. But you need it now more than ever.
Yeah. And it's such a refreshing time, actually, as well. So we're back visiting Corey's dad, for example, and I'd only met him once. And this is a really great time that I've found to be really beneficial to come and get to know his family. And, we're looking after his grandma. And I think that's something that I've been able to appreciate. But I have had friends that have been in really difficult situations in roommates, as they're traveling and stuff. And it seems to be, I always say, like, communication is so important to people. If you're not feeling good, just tell them, I'm sorry if I seem short with you. I'm just going to go over here and work on me.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we've been pretty good at as a couple who's, obviously in isolation together and also working together on this project, where we've just had that communication where on Sunday I woke up and just my mindset wasn't into it. I was trying to write some outlines for this podcast and just couldn't pump them out. And Lianne kind of took the reins and was just didn't think anything of it. I just kind of wanted to have an introverted day on my own and expressed that to her, and she was like, by all means. And then she kind of had a day like that a little bit yesterday. So having that kind of open communication has really helped us. And I think the more time that people continue to spend together, it goes back to what we were talking about was say what I mean. I mean, it's really important to just have that communication, that line of communication be open. And that's why I really that SWIM acronym just really caught my attention. Mm. In your work, you mentioned the need to truly understand what forgiveness means before we can experience freedom. How do you define forgiveness, and what role does it play in the path to empowerment?
So I think forgiveness is overrated, actually. And when I say that people really have to understand what forgiveness means, I'm big on definitions, because I think that otherwise we can just sort of, start making any word mean any way we want it to mean. So forgiveness has three things to it. One is you undergo a change in feelings and attitudes regarding something that happened. The second is you let go of negative emotions. And the third is you have an increased ability to wish the offender well. So all of that said, I don't find forgiveness to be necessary for people to move on. And I think that when we preach this idea that you have to forgive in order to be able to let go, you're not giving people credit to be able to let go without harboring negative feelings. I have had thousands of clients, And lots of them have been able to let go without forgiving. Now, the only other thing I would add to it is you can't forgive without letting go, but you can let go without forgiving. So to put that into perspective, if I do decide to forgive somebody that I'm dating, then I have to let go, because the alternative is I tell you I forgive you, but then I harbor those ill feelings, and I keep reminding you of everything that you did. So you can't forgive without letting go. But what I can say is somebody hurt me really bad. I'm not going to forgive them, but I'm going to let it go from my internal conscience, because it's not going to turn me into an angry person, and I'm not going to let what one person did affect how I treat everybody else. So I think it's overrated, to be honest with you, and I think it's psychologically damaging to presume and to tell people that the only way that you can truly be happy is if you forgive. Weinstein accusers, do they have to forgive Weinstein in order to ever be happy? No. What they have to do is to not let what happened to them, and I'm not saying this is easy, because it's not, but to not let what happened to them rule their life. That's letting go. They don't have to forgive him in order to let go. So I'll end it there, because I'll answer any other questions you have, but I truly believe that we overstate the need to forgive.
Yeah. No, I agree with that statement. It's like you said, with the Harvey Weinstein example, it makes sense. But do you have any tools or any tips or practices for any listeners that are struggling to let go? Have you got anything that you say to your clients that you say, this helps?
Yeah, I think three things. So I think the first one is to detach yourself from the blame. Because in a lot of ways, when something happens to us, the first question we ask ourselves is, what did we do wrong? That shouldn't be your first question. The presumption shouldn't be that you did something wrong, and thus you have to really investigate yourself. So you can let go easier if you stop blaming yourself by default. The second thing that you can do is to detach yourself from the person who did the harm, even if it's only temporary. So there's nothing wrong with saying, look, I need some time right now. So letting go sometimes means just not associating yourself with a person, even for a period of time, so that they're not in your conscience. And the third thing I would say in terms of letting something go is to find something new. And what I mean by that isn't to just move on to a new relationship, but we often take time to agonize in our own thoughts and feelings, and that's not giving us any opportunity to fill our head and our heart with anything else. So find other things to fill your head and heart with that are meaningful and that aren't going to put you back in the same place. Because the worst thing you can do is to try to, just find anything and everything that'll take up time, and then you end up attaching yourself to something unhealthy.
Yeah, I think that's really useful. I can think of a time in my life where I kind of went through these phases, and the letting go was one of the hardest things. And the first tool that you had said was that, it's okay to just remove them from your life in some way, shape, or form. And that's ended up being what I had to do with this person, where I haven't necessarily forgiven them, but in order for me to begin moving on, I just had to say, I need to not see your name. I need to not see photos. I need you to not reach out to me, and I need you to respect that. And it took some time for me to be able to get there and say that to them. But once I did, that's when I was really able to start that process. So I didn't even realize that I was doing it at the time, but I kind of followed your 3 steps a little bit. So I think that's really sound advice for people. You run an online course through the Daily Om called the 7 Weeks to Self-Love, which our listeners can take and put the topics discussed into practice in their own lives. What kind of things can they expect to learn from your course?
Yeah, I guess I would just start by saying at a very high level what they won't learn. So they're not going to learn how to find love in 10 days, because that's not realistic. They're not going to learn how to make someone love them, because that's not realistic either. I would say it's very practical. I tend to be a very practical person. It's a very practical way to learn maybe 3 things. One, how to actually let go of the judgments of others, which again is one of the biggest steps to self-discovery and self-love, is how do I let go of the constant worry that I have about what other people think about me? The second thing that they would learn is to really appreciate the difference between what people and society tell us to love about ourselves versus what we should really look to love about ourselves. So to get out of the superficial and artificial and into the more meaningful self-love. And I would say that the third is to stop tying self-love and self-discovery to some need to be constantly learning. and I know that sounds ironic because it's my course, but one of the things I say in the course time and time again is I do the course, like the total time I might actually be talking to them through the course might be like 5 hours over 7 weeks, because we can get into such a self-help, self-discovery thing that we'll buy 100 audiobooks, and all we'll spend our days doing is listening to podcasts and audios and all that. And we're putting so much energy into finding ourselves that we're never actually spending time to find ourselves. So again, let go of the judgments of others, rethink what it means to self-love from, maybe societal tropes and stereotypes, and unplug sometimes. Unplug from your constant need to learn and just be.
Would you say that kind of correlates or relates to someone taking what they've learned and just putting it into practice? It sounds to me like that seems to me to be something that people might struggle with, is I'm just going to keep on getting these little tidbits of information on how I can improve as an individual or within my relationship or whatever it might be. But they listen to it. They're like, they don't really digest it. And then they kind of move on to the next one, where it sounds like you might be saying like, no, like take that piece of information and then spend a few hours a day, 2 days, whatever it might be, and really just like try and put it into practice.
Yeah, and I would say 2 very quick things. One, I had somebody email me 2 days ago about my course, and in the email they said, I just finished this course, now I want to sign up for yours. And I said, don't sign up for mine. Take in what you just learned from this other person's and do something about it first. And then the second thing I would say is, when I do relationship coachings, I will not see a client more than 4 times. And that is on my website. That's one of my rules, and it's because of this. You can become addicted to coaching. You can become addicted to the idea of having somebody who can listen to you, who will take all of your stuff that you share, but then you won't ever do anything about it. So I will not see a client more than 4 times, because I don't want them to become addicted to coaching. I want them to do something about the coaching. And if we can commit to 4 sessions, then we're going to commit to action, not just me getting paid $275 an hour for every hour you're ever willing to talk to me, which if I don't put a limit on it, I've had clients who've wanted to have sessions with me for 2 years. No. I think it's unethical, and I think it doesn't help them move forward.
Good for you.
Absolutely.
Good for you. I like it. You like a tough love. I like it. Like, you know what? I'm going to teach you this. Now you got to go do it. Yeah, it's good. I like that.
Chris, we're really appreciative for your time, your experience, your expertise on this.
Yeah.
Thank you for being a guest with us.
Interview digestion.
All right. Well, thank you so much to Chris. I think that we all learned quite a bit listening to him, especially in regards to just kind of self-empowerment, taking the time to make sure that you're working on you, which can make you a better contributor to your relationships in life. And Lianne, I'm just kind of wondering, after listening to that, being someone that hasn't really spent so much time thinking about things like mindfulness and just kind of being in the moment, have you got anything that you've learned through this episode?
Yeah, I guess I've just learned the importance of being mindful. I kind of like shrugged it under the rug because I hadn't felt any negative thoughts about it. But yeah, I'm definitely going to start just every day, just starting to take a breath and just think about how I feel about things and things like that, and see how we go.
Gratitude is a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Take it further.
Another thing you can do as well is take an emotional intelligence test. We took it and it was quite interesting. We'll put a link in our show notes so you guys can grab that, because it's a bit of a long one. But yeah, basically just rates your emotional intelligence in terms of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. Let's talk about our results. We took it.
How'd you score?
I got an 8, a 7, a 10, and an 8. So my best one was social awareness, which I guess is a good thing.
I think that's true. I mean, you kind of have that being from working in the service industry for a long time. You always got to put your needs to the side and just focus on making your table as happy as possible and picking up on their vibes.
Yeah. What about you?
I scored pretty high in the self-awareness because I am 100% a narcissist. So I know everything that's going on with me.
Hey, you admit it. It's fine.
Yeah. No, I think
the road to recovery.
If you're a narcissist, just admit that you're a narcissist.
And you get more attention.
Absolutely. So I think that that's a good way to go. There's a couple of things that we'll recommend if you want to take this a little bit further. You can read the book called The Miracle of Mindfulness, the Classic Guide.
Who writes that, Corey?
This is a name that's tough, but I believe it is Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Nobel Peace Prize nominee and Buddhist monk. He explains how to acquire the skills of mindfulness to slow down our lives and truly live in the moment. Find the link in our show notes.
And guys, remember, education does not stop after high school or university. The benefits of being a lifelong learner and growing mind, skills, abilities, everything's an experience opportunity really in life, isn't it? And if you approach it with the right mindset, there's no grades. You don't need a certificate or a gold star. You just know that you've learned something from a situation.
I learned a lot right after the 2008 global economic issues. I was in a really good place personally, but I learned that my actions were not in line with my vision for my future. After losing my house in a foreclosure and bankruptcy, it helped me to look back and really understand the poor decisions that I made that led to that result. I also learned that you can do everything right, quote, by society standards, but that does not guarantee long-term happiness or success. I think that this current global climate with everyone being in quarantine, losing their jobs, people being sick all over the place, really shows us how much control we really don't have in our lives.
Yeah.
And it's another reason to stop and smell those roses, because you just never know when life can just absolutely pivot to something new and unfamiliar.
And it's your decision to make the best out of that and, learn something. You weren't discouraged, you picked yourself up and you got back on with it again.
Yeah.
So,
what's something that you've learned?
From a negative experience?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I lost my dad when I was 18, and when I was 17, I was helping my mum a lot with caring for him and stuff. And I think that was obviously such an awful experience for me. But I actually came out on top of it stronger. It gave me a new appreciation for life. It made me say, okay, well, I want to go see the world and I want to go do this. And, it really helped me set out what I wanted to do with my life, at least in terms of how I wanted to live it, not necessarily jobs or anything. But I think that gave me an appreciation. It gave me appreciation for my health. I realized I never want to smoke a cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously I don't wish it didn't happen, but I managed to make something good come from it, definitely.
I think that's an important thing, is to take these things that come into our lives that could just be completely knock us off the rails and somehow try and spin them into a positive and come out the other end of it better. Yeah. And I think a really good way to do that is to just try and be mindful of what's happening and taking the time to go back and reflect on why it might have happened. Mm-hmm. Were there decisions that I made that led to this happening? And then trying to not make those same mistakes in the future. So we can't fit this all into one episode, but it's going to be explored in the rest of the season, so be sure to stay with us.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode on mindfulness. You can go to mazeoflove.com to learn some more about Chris and even take one of his daily OM courses.
Yeah, the course is 13 lessons, and you decide whether you want to pay $15, $35, or $50.
Amazing.
He also has heaps of blog posts on there and a bunch of other things, so be sure to check it out.
Also remember to check out episode 2, where we are going to be looking at meditation and breathing, and how we can tie in what we've learned in this episode to that and speak with Dr. Christopher Willard of the Harvard Medical School.
Yeah, episode 2 is coming right up, so enjoy it and take it away, voiceover guy.
Thanks, Lianne and Corey. Subscribe now to the Forever Break podcast on your favorite platform: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and more. If you enjoyed this episode, help us out and leave a 5-star review. And remember, you can find all the juicy details discussed in this episode in the show notes at foreverbreak.com/podcast.